everybody. I am here with Amaya Rourke, who is a professional astrologer and one of my internet pals. And we are here to talk about the Ace of Wands. Hi, Amaya.
Hello, Matt. I'm so happy to be here. This is such a cool project.
I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I'm so glad that you were able to do this one with us. Can you tell us a little bit about the Ace of Wands? Why did you pick that card?
I loved this giant pine tree. I have a connection with pine trees and wooded pine kind of areas. I grew up as a little girl in Wyoming, and I would sneak into my neighbor's property that had a little patch of forest full of pine trees in it. And I would stay there for like hours. I would freak my parents out. I was very young, and I just loved it there. And I've always had that kind of connection. But on a spiritual basis, pine trees were both solar and chthonic. You know, traditionally they considered them to be these solar beings, but also they had a lot to do with the dead and your ancestors and keeping out the dead and bad spirits. That's why you'd bring a Christmas tree into your home. So it's just so multi-layered, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I really like that. Tell me a little bit about the Ace of Wands in general. How do you interpret that card when you read it?
I really love how Rachel Pollack puts it. She says that all of the aces, except for the Ace of Pentacles, is this kind of start from a primordial experience. It's like a gift from the primordial. And I like to think of it as the much needed courage and sometimes hubris to get things going. I think I was reading, or I think it was my friend Alex, who does beautiful art on Twitter. You've probably seen him. He does the astrological art.
Yeah.
He also is really into psychology, and he told me that he was watching this podcast about how you have to have kind of a narcissistic urge to create. You have to go, oh, I could do that. And that's the first beginning before you realize, no, I can't, and I'm not shit. So it's kind of why I like the aces in general. But in your deck, it was between the Ace of Wands and I think it was the Nine of Wands. And it was just that the plants themselves seemed to kind of call out to me in the deck. They really spoke. And that was a big part of why I chose that one when we talked about it.
What are some other Ace of Wands that you like, or what are some other decks that you use where you see that card? And do they feel different to you than that one, or how do they apply
Oh,
differently?
yeah. I have so many decks. Well, not so many. I would say my friend Jason probably beats me in every aspect. He's got like 40 decks. I feel like having like 8 decks is a lot. One of the ones that I pulled that I've used for a long time and was surprisingly really good because I didn't expect it was the Animal Totem deck. And this is the Ace of Wands. It is actually a lightning bug jar on a wand.
Whoa, that's super cool. I love that.
And what I like about this deck is that, like yours, it's actually really animistic and it's about the animals and the ecology in the card. So it goes beyond the initial Rider Waite significations that a lot of us know. And it pushes you, especially, it's a good contemplative deck, to push yourself to think deeper about the card and deeper about your own connection to the world at large, which I think is what spirituality is really should be used for, is how can we connect with this world and get deeper into this world and sink into this world. I'm not a fan of the people who want to like spin out of the grid or whatever. I'm very much like, no, I think the only way out is through, and you better get married to it and really love it because we only have one shot here, at least in my opinion, from what I can gather. And I don't know about you, but I want to be just as in love with this place as I am with any idea because I only get to experience this.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that, it's funny with this project, and for better or worse, a lot of my projects, a lot of the things that I wind up liking about it are unintentional or feel like they weren't really part of like a conscious process, which is kind of embarrassing. So people find all these things that they think I put a lot of thought into that wind up being really beautiful and interesting, but they weren't conscious choices necessarily. And I feel like the idea of letting the landscape speak through the deck is super interesting to me, and it's one of the ways I've kind of come to appreciate it is and going back to it years later to say, to hear folks talk about how they interact with the species. I really liked hearing what you said about the pines. Tell me, so you mentioned you had 8 other decks. What's the other interpretations of the Ace of Wands that you like?
Well, I'm pulling it up right now. So I just recently got the Tarot of the Divine by Yoshio Tano, and I love it. It's all folklore and fairy tales, and she, of course, has been like an artist for like Disney and DreamWorks, and I absolutely love this deck and the amount of work she put into it. I've almost found it, but I found the other aces. She does just beautiful work. And in general, I've just really connected with this because the other part of my spirituality was my parents really tried hard to keep me from anything witchy because they were extremely, extremely evangelical. And yeah, it didn't work because they then brought in a whole bunch of folk and fairy tale books. And I read them and then would go try this stuff out in the woods and didn't know that, you know, folk and fairy tale books are how we have classically always transmitted witchcraft.
Yeah.
So I was doing witchcraft at like age 4 or 5, not realizing it was witchcraft, and neither did my parents. But this is the really cool one. I think you'll like it because of that idea of naming things. And this is, I believe, a Japanese fairy tale about this magical paintbrush that they use for calligraphy and its power to create. So, and I think it's interesting you said that. First of all, I love that you have shown up for the muse and you let the muse speak through you. So like you have unintentionally, you kind of do what I do when I'm reading tarot. I call it the drunk monkey method. Like I let cards fall out of the deck and those are the cards, right? But for you, it's like you just did the project and then it took on a life of its own. That's really the beauty when you are more of a vessel rather than the only thing driving a project. And I can really see that you did that. And it comes through so loud in your deck. Like it's very alive. It's definitely got a spirit of its own. And that's lovely. So I think you're really good at that.
Thanks. It's nice to be kind of trained as a journalist and kind of lazy, letting other people do the work for you. You know, you kind of just write down what other people tell you. Like, so it's not a bad way to go. I want to ask a little about your reading practice. I really like that. So your readings for astrology are so dead on and kind of terrifying. But how do you approach? So I've experienced that, and that's a lot to take. But your tarot reading, I don't think I've really seen your approach to it. I like the drunken monkey, but what's your typical approach? Do you use specific spreads? How do you approach tarot?
So I do have a few spreads that I use. I'm not very experimental. I think I'm very boring when it comes to stuff. Most of the time, you know, I ask questions regarding outcomes. I don't usually ask yes or no questions. And one of my favorite spreads that I use is an arrow. I call it an arrow spread. I think I learned it from an app like 10 years ago. And essentially you put like 3 in a line and then you form kind of like a triangle at the end with 3 more. And so the first one tells you whatever it is that you need to release. The second one is the intention you should set. The third one is the actions you should take. And then the top part of the arrow is about community support. The bottom part is like circumstantial support. And then the end card is your outcome, which is really great because then you can get a very clear read on like, this is how you're going to experience this and what you should watch out for. And also I like the support component because I'll often like keep myself from doing something thinking I won't have support to do it. So it's a nice one to pull. So that's one I use a lot.
Compare what you do with interpreting astrology versus how you compare your interpretations of the tarot. Can you compare those two? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, so astrology is definitely a language, but it has very particular techniques, which is how I can land at extremely accurate readings, especially like looking through time and being able to see, you know, what kind of experience are we likely to have over the next several months or years. You know, that language has a very particular grammar, you could say, very particular structure. And there is intuition there because there are so many ways you can interpret astrology. That's kind of the hard part about it is if I don't get context from my clients, definitely I don't cold read. I need context. We need to have a conversation. And if I can get that context, then I can tease out what this next period of time is going to look like or the major themes in your life. It's not devoid of context. But with tarot, I feel like I could get an entire story, maybe not in extreme detail, but enough detail for me to make interesting choices and to find interesting paths. And it's a lot more loose. I would say that it's the difference between being an opera singer, which I would say that's more of astrology, it's very technically driven, and someone who just plays the hang drum on the corner.
I did want to ask. I'm starting to get some frog noise here, which I love.
I love it.
Yeah, the chorus frogs are going a little wild in the creek now that I've been sitting down.
I've asked my guides this season to put me in more contact with frogs and toads. So this is wonderful.
They're here. They're here. Amaya, this is awesome to talk to you. I really, really appreciate being able to talk to you about this, and also the work you've done and the things that you post.
Well, I love your deck so much. Like I said, like your book, so close to my heart. And you're a brilliant creator. I can't wait to see what you put out next. And I was really, really happy to be asked to be on this because, like, I just love your deck. So thank you.